there were some questions posed to you specifically about debt. And there seemed to be a concern about the mounting debt. And I am going out on a limb, and I am going to ask you if you are aware of how much debt we added under the Trump administration, out of curiosity. If you don't know, I know off the top of my head, but something tells me you may know.
I have an imprecise number. I
Okay.
know you have the precise number in front of you, so I don't want to give you the imprecise number if you have the precise.
No. Give me the imprecise.
No, please.
Well, I'm going off of my head because that wasn't part of what I was supposed to say. But long story short, $8 trillion was added under the Trump administration. And so I think that it is important that we focus on making sure that we're keeping our debt under control. But I think it's also important that we're honest about how that debt is accrued and make sure that we don't continue to make the same mistakes. I know that the election was brought up, and there are those that are standing by their man, but they also seem to be concerned about debt, which seems like the two don't go together, because we know that their man actually is really good at running up the credit card debt for this country, because he likes to give tax breaks to his very rich friends, which means that we don't get as much money coming through the door when they are not required to pay their fair share. So I just wanted to make sure that we put that out there first and foremost. I recently was appointed to the weaponization subcommittee, and so I'm going to have plenty of long days ahead of me, kind of like what I have here on oversight. But the point of the weaponization committee was to have a conversation about the government being weaponized in a way so that people could somehow get some personal gain, because there's this theory that this administration has somehow weaponized the government. There is not this acknowledgement that the other guy just is a criminal, because that's just too hard to believe, even though he currently is sitting in New York facing criminal charges that were not brought by the federal government, but instead by state government. Nevertheless, so when I think about weaponization, I honestly can only think about Trump and his administration and all the work that he did to harm federal employees. So to be clear, Trump's 2020 executive order would have effectively gutted civil service job protections for workers across the federal government.
Crockett also pointed out that Republicans seemed unable to fathom that Trump might be a criminal. First and foremost, I recently was appointed to the weaponization subcommittee, she explained. But the point of the weaponization committee was to have a conversation about the government being weaponized in a way so that people could somehow get some personal gain, because there's this theory that this administration has somehow weaponized the government.
Trump would have created politically charged firings of potentially thousands of federal workers and made these public servants subject to the whims of a political dictator and his posse rather than the adherence of the tenets of our Constitution. So let's be clear. Individuals pursuing public service do so largely because of their belief in government. I'm sure you can make a lot more money if you just decided to go elsewhere in private industry. A lot of us could, honestly. But if this rule is implemented, it would destroy the little bit of foundation and structure public servants still have that allowed them to put people over politics. How do I know this? Because Trump and his Republican lackeys stated they felt nonpartisan bureaucrats were hampering Trump's policies, and he wanted to, quote, shatter the deep state. In fact, President Donald Trump's personnel chief, John McEntee, told agency officials at a meeting to implement staffing changes and movements across the government. Mr. Chairman, I would like to enter into the record an article from Axios stating that Mr. John McEntee, a 29-year-old at the time, a former body man to Trump, who was fired in 2018 by then Chief of Staff John Kelly, but then rehired and promoted to head the Presidential Personnel Office, directed staff to identify anti-Trumpers and stated that they will no longer get promotions and would be shifted around agencies.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. Now, Mr. Miller, can you tell us how the implementation of Schedule F would impact the morale and performance of all federal employees?
Thank you, Congresswoman. This is a critical issue and a critical question. In the first week in office, President Biden canceled Schedule F. This is real for OMB. The vast majority of our staff in 2020 was being considered to move to Schedule F. I think this would have a debilitating impact on the basic performance of federal agencies. We already have a system where 3,000 different roles are for political appointees. Those political appointees are in leadership and decision-making roles overseeing their agencies. If we were to go down the path that you outlined, where there were arbitrary or political decisions made instead of decisions made around expertise and experience, it would deeply harm the institutional knowledge in our agencies, but it would also deeply harm our ability to recruit talent going forward into organizations that we want to organize around performance.
Thank you so much for your answer, and I absolutely agree. My mother has worked in I don't know how many federal agencies since I was a little girl in elementary school, and I promise you, we have changed from Democrats to Republicans to MAGA, back to all the things. But I can tell you that she is so very qualified to do her work, and this would be devastating. Thank you so much, and I yield.
Jasmine Crockett, D. Texas, blasted Republicans Tuesday for blaming President Joe Biden and Democrats for America's problems while ignoring former President Donald Trump's role. During a House Oversight Committee hearing on the Office of Management and Budget, Crockett noted that her Republican colleagues had complained about the national debt. Long story short, $8 trillion was added under the Trump administration, Crockett jabbed. And so I think that it is important that we focus on making sure that we're keeping our debt under control. But I think it's also important that we're honest about how that debt is accrued and make sure that we don't continue to make the same mistakes. There is not this acknowledgement that the other guy just is a criminal, she added, because that's just too hard to believe, even though he currently is sitting in New York facing criminal charges that were not brought by the federal government but instead by state government.
As you leave the page, don't forget to hit the like bell and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so as yet. Thank you.